I don't know about you, but when I visit a new city, I find I get a feel for the place by driving or walking the streets and observing the traffic, the people, and the activity on the sidewalks. This is never more true than when I was in China. I drove to Hancheng, China, from Xi'an. As I approached the city, I saw huge power plants and massive multi-story apartment buildings being built. And there was that hazy-like smog in the air. When I first entered the city, the streets were wide and not much traffic. The streets were quite clean wherever you went. I was traveling with my Chinese guide, Mr. Gao. He often stopped and asked directions from the locals, as he was from another part of China. We worked our way into the central part of the so-called New City. Our main destination was the Old City, or Old Town. We were told to park our car and walk into the Old City. So that's what we did. We passed a free laundromat as we got closer to the Old Town. Vendors seemed to use the sidewalks for their business. I think this lady was constructing a kind of umbrella to protect her from the sun. The sidewalk can certainly be handy for these big projects. Off the main drag, we spotted some skilled workmen creating signs on stone. These craftsmen worked all day long with repetitive motion. Despite the heavy tools they were using, they were doing very exacting work. The results were beautiful. When we finally got into parts of the old town, the streets got narrower. After seeing other people in their cars trying to maneuver around, we were pretty glad that we decided to walk in rather than take our car. And you can see that on these streets, most of the people walk in the street, not on the sidewalks. Although right here the sidewalks are quite broad. A typical sight was a group of men huddled over a table out on the sidewalk. They are playing a version of chess called Chinese chess. Note that the pieces are placed on the lines, not inside the squares. As we walked deeper into Old Town, the streets got narrower and the sidewalks got narrower. People were everywhere. It would certainly be hard to maneuver a car around in here. You'd have to be familiar with the place. And I noticed that even the dogs have problems maneuvering around. Here, the shops along the side seem to be closed, but out in front of them on the sidewalk, there are vendors doing business. It was nice to see some food that I could recognize. In some ways, it looked like a day out on the town. On the left, you'll notice food displayed on the street itself. On the right are all kinds of offerings. Some people scour the trash to find leftovers that they may be able to make some money from. The end objective of our walk into the Old Town was the Confucius Temple. It's an old building, and it could certainly use some paint. Then behind that temple is another temple and a place called the Sacrificing Hall. Here people came to pray. There was an attendant who helped them through the rather elaborate procedure. But the attendant made certain that you provided a contribution. Now, you'll remember that we walked a long way from our car into Old Town. So by afternoon, we were tired and in no mood to walk all the way back. My guide, Mr. Gao, talked to some of the local workmen. Where could we find a taxi? Well, they didn't really know where there was a taxi stand. Maybe over in that direction. As we stood watching the traffic and trying to decide what to do, we spotted a taxi and hailed it down.
Taxi.
Our taxi driver knew her way around Old Town. It was quite a ride. Another chance to explore the city from the street. Our taxi had a fare in the front seat when we got in, so the driver dropped her off first, then continued to drive us to our destination. This lady did not crack a smile, but I was glad she was concentrating on the road. As we got closer to our destination, the streets got wider. Now, I've been taught not to pass on the outside of a turn. Back at our hotel the next morning, the depressing air quality was apparent as I scanned the nearby buildings from my hotel room. We got ready to leave for our next destination. Jaywalking is always dangerous. And Mr. Gao tried to figure out his new car's GPS system. I was no help. Can you figure it out? We left town with nice memories of the streets of Old Town Hancheng.